So as I said at the intro, Mean Girls, 2004 film, was then adapted to a Broadway musical in 2018. Again, musical. It was specifically adapted to be a musical on the Broadway stage. I did see it in 2018, actually, when I was here in New York. Had a great time there. And now they are bringing that musical back to the cinematic landscape, and so it is doing a couple of different things all at once. It's paying homage to the original film that came out 20 years ago, but it is also including these brand new elements, these brand new songs that were taken from the Broadway musical as well. Interestingly enough, I think that it should be noted that this movie, like recent musicals, were not marketed as a musical. We saw that with Wonka. We're seeing it in a lot of different respects. Even The Color Purple. These movies are being targeted as just pure dramas or comedies without the musical element included in the marketing. And studio executives have admitted that they are purposefully trying to steer away from marketing their films as musicals because people have this thing about musicals, like, oh, I don't want to go to the movies to see a musical. I'm not really down to do that. But then when they go see it, it's like, oh, it wasn't bad. I actually enjoyed it. So just kind of a really interesting state of things when it comes to musicals and cinematic adaptations. But all that out the way, man, how did you feel about this brand new Mean Girls movie?
So I am a huge Mean Girls fan. Mean Girls 2004 is just one of my favorite movies. I think it came out at a time that I both found that material funny and I guess somewhat relatable. Being an upcoming youth. And that movie is hilarious. There are so many. There are very few films that you can have as many quotables than as is in Mean Girls. I mean, the whole movie is quotable, and you've probably heard a Mean Girls quote and not even seen the movie, and it's a Mean Girls quote. It's kind of crazy how quotable that movie is. So, very big fan. And what's also funny about this adaptation thing that you're saying, that like this is now a movie that was technically based off a book because the original was like a whole book, Queen Bee Wannabes or whatever. So it was a book, then it was a movie, then it was a musical, and now we got a musical movie, and here we are. It's just crazy. It's a lot going on in that regard. But long story short, very excited to see this film and for it to be musical form. Very excited to hear Tina Fey was returning for another story. And seeing what it would be in musical form. And to be honest, I had a blast. I had a really good time watching this film. I think coming into it, I expected this film to be, I think, a normal everyday musical, which some of it was. But I think for me, there's two secrets in this movie that I really like. One of them is Renee Rapp, who was just standout, breakout, whatever you want to call it. I'm now a fan of Renee Rapp. But the other thing is, whenever a song broke out in this movie, it just wasn't a song. It like turned into a music video. And I thought that was a really cool concept and idea that they put forth in this film. Was like, oh no, it's not just a normal musical. We're not just going to use the environment we're in. We're going to turn it into a whole music video. And I thought that was really cool and a different change on things. But some other things to note: this film it's pretty much a 1-to-1 from the old Mean Girls. There's a few beats that are missing, and I would argue there's actually a couple of important beats that are missing from the original Mean Girls film that were translated to the musical. But it makes sense because you have to make songs. Now it's like, oh, this is the same beat from the original Mean Girls, but here's a song, and we can't spend too much time on maybe a couple of those other storylines that make sense or be important. So that's like one of the things that you can either see as a positive or a negative. I just noticed it because I'm such a fan of the old Mean Girls. I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of not a thing here. So I thought that was interesting. One other thing is I really think that I think the newer generation who's never seen the old Mean Girls is going to enjoy this. I think the people who might not enjoy it as much and might not like it as much could be some of those original Mean Girls enthusiasts or sticklers. But again, I loved it. I had a good time. And I think Renee Rapp is a standout. But other than that, yeah, I enjoyed myself. And I think it's probably my first favorite film of the year. It's not a high bar. It's just a funny thing to say, I think, because it's January. But my first favorite film of the year so far. And yeah, I'm looking forward to more people seeing it. I know a lot of people haven't seen it yet, but I'm really curious on what other people have to say.
So I want to preface this and just say again, I saw the Broadway stage musical in 2018 when it was on Broadway, and in seeing that musical, I was very surprised at what I saw because it really kind of knocked my socks off. It blew me away in a way that I did not anticipate and expect. I was very apprehensive about a Broadway stage musical turning a film into a musical essentially that had no musical numbers. And so I walked in really apprehensive, and after I saw the show, I was pretty amazed by it. I was like, wow, that completely did things that I didn't anticipate. The music was pretty good. All of the elements that it introduced that were relatively new to update for a new generation, such as social media, all very interesting things. And then just the production of that stage musical was a very high quality. You could tell that the production value was incredible. I unfortunately did not get to enjoy Renee Rapp on the stage because she was also a part of the original Broadway musical. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
see her during my performance, but still knew of what she was going to bring to this movie and knew that she had a particular connection to Mean Girls as a franchise. And she's also a musician as well. And so she's making a real mark for herself. And coming into this movie, after watching it and as we were watching it, I found it to be okay. I think a lot of it is just due to the fact that it's a couple of things. One, this is, again, adapting a musical, which was also adapting a film. And the musical is the new invention. The musical itself is the new thing to bring to this franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And for somebody who has seen the stage musical and coming into the cinematic adaptation of that, there's not really anything new here. I've seen all of this stuff. Besides the material that they cut, they had to cut this down to make it shorter for a cinematic adaptation. But I think all of the surprise and all of the opportunity to really impress me, it happened with the stage musical. And so by the time I got to the
Mm-hmm.
movie, I'm like, well, yeah, I've heard that song before. I've seen that. I've seen it translated on stage, and I see what they're doing here with the cinematic screen version. And also just the fact that, like, there are scenes and dialogue that's like lifted one for one from the original Mean Girls movie,
Yeah.
which
Mm-hmm.
is not really a huge problem. It happens, in other films. Like, that's a thing. It's okay. But again, I think as somebody who's like lived with this material for a while now, and you come to a film, it's just not really all that new. And I do think that in some regards, a cinematic adaptation of a Broadway stage musical, some things you just kind of inherently lose in that translation. Like, there's not, I think a lot of the cinematic things that they do on stage, like some of the more elaborate set pieces and some of those things that you talked about that look like a music video and they really kind of create a new world within that particular musical piece, that stuff really works on stage. On the big
Mm-hmm.
screen, my expectations adjust and it doesn't really work. Like, it's fine and it reminds me of what I saw, but it's not, I don't know, it's just not as grand and it's not as big and it's not as epic as I kind of wanted it to be. And I think it's just two
Mm-hmm.
different, it's two very different visceral experiences that you'll have, like from sitting in a theater versus sitting in front of a movie screen. And so when I saw some of those musical set pieces translated into the movie, I'm like, oh, that doesn't feel like how I felt watching the musical. It doesn't hit the same. It doesn't feel like this big
Mm-hmm.
dramatic moment like I thought that it would. There is one set piece that, like, still I think really works, and I think it's the one at the party that they have where it's like it gets like the red strobe lighting, it gets really crazy. That one, like, that still worked a lot, and I remember seeing that like on stage, and I was like, wow, that's like a crazy moment, crazy visuals, really impressive stuff there. But I think that that's just kind of like one of the things that you may lose if you're too connected with it. You might
Mm-hmm.
walk out disappointed, or conversely, on the other hand, I've known and talked to people and have heard from people who are very much ingratiated into all of these different things. They love the movie, and then they saw the musical. They're theater kids. They love the theatrical stage Broadway musical, and then they saw the film, and all of that stuff just still worked for them. Because they kind of play the hits, they play the greatest hits, they play the things that you really like. And so
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, I just kind of walked away thinking like, well, yeah, I've seen this twice now, and there's not really much more I can feel about it seeing it for a third time.
Mm-hmm.
What I will say, though, as you said, Renee Rapp, she's incredible. I also want to shout out Auili Carvalho. She was also great in this movie as well. She's literally Moana, and she came into this movie and also had a really great role as well. I think another thing that I will just point out, though, that's interesting to me, the original movie, like when you look at, I guess, the tension between Lindsay Lohan and Rachel McAdams, I can believe
Yeah.
that as a feud. This
Yeah.
one, Angori Rice and Renee Rapp,
Yeah.
that doesn't really
Yeah.
work for me. I like Angori Rice as an
So
actor, but that's very lopsided to me. And that was one aspect where I was like,
yeah.
I don't know if I can believe this part of the movie.
And one of the things they do in the movie is they make the stallionness of Regina George like a thing, right? Like, it's like, no, this girl's a stallion. And that does not help Gory Rice's case at all, because Renee Rapp looked like she's about 30 something. By the way, she's not. She's like 24 or something. But when you watch the movie, you're like, nah, there's no way this girl against this girl. It's not even
It's a
close. And
grown
so
ass woman.
I
She coming in contact
grown
with.
ass woman, bro. And so when because Gory Rice looks younger than what she is. She's like 23, but she actually looks like she's 18. You know what I'm saying? And so I agree right there. It definitely didn't work at all in that way.
Yeah, that was another thing. But ultimately I do think this movie, it sets out to do a specific thing and it achieves that. Like it's one of those properties where it's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I agree with that aspect. Like Tina Fey has literally been with this material for more than 20 years now. She's in the movie, playing the same exact character once again. Her and Tim Meadows, in fact. But they throw in a nice twist there. But it's
They
one of those
do.
things where it's like, yeah, I certainly understand it from a studio perspective, from a business perspective. Like, this is just to create a new iteration of the story for another generation. And they'll probably do this like every 20 years for Mean Girls. Like, it'll be the same story that we all know and love.
Mm,
Kind of similar to A Star is Born. There's like 4 of those movies.
yeah,
Like, they get made like every
that's
20,
true.
25 years. Mean Girls just might be the same thing. And you know what? That's okay. We need those too. So overall, folks, those are our thoughts on the brand new Mean Girls movie. If you've checked out this film, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.